When getting voters to support a candidate in an election, is there a difference between a recorded phone call from the candidate or a flyer sent through the mail? We have a sample of 500 voters randomly divided into two groups of 250 each. One group gets the phone call, one group gets the flyer. They're then contacted to see if they're going to vote for that candidate, and we want to know if there's evidence that the proportions of support are different between the two methods. So first we want to define the relevant parameters and state the null and alternative hypotheses. So what we'd be interested in looking at here is proportions again, because we're looking at categorical data. We're just asking, do you plan to vote for this candidate in question? That's a yes/no statement. So we're dealing with categorical data. And so when we deal with categorical data, that's when we're interested in proportions. So we can let P1 here represent proportion who are voting based off of a phone call. And then we can let P2 be the proportion voting based off of a flyer. And these are population values that we're testing for, and we're using our sample to try to figure out which of the hypotheses would be true. So our null hypothesis is that there's no difference in the two methods, so that the proportions are equal or they have a difference of 0. And we're just asked if they're different, not whether either is better. So we're looking at a two-tailed alternative of not equal to 0. Or equivalently, this says that P1 and P2 are not the same. So suppose that in our sample, of the 250 who got the phone call, we have 152 who say yes. And of the 250 who got a flyer, we got 145. Does that feel like a significant difference? So our two sample values, P1 hat and P2 hat, if we take their difference, what do we get? So our first sample proportion, P1 hat, would be 152 people out of 250. Our second sample value would be 145 out of 250. So these two values are the two P hat values. Those are our sample values. The difference here is 0.028. So that doesn't feel like very much of a difference if we're talking about 250 people and we don't have very substantial difference here. So this would be a no, not significant difference. The difference here is negligible. Then suppose that we had different data. Suppose our two sample proportions for the 250 would be 188 out of 250 and 120 out of 250. That gives us a difference of about 27% or 0.272. So then that feels like a pretty big difference in terms of who's voting for the candidate based off these two methods. So here we would say yes, this does feel like more evidence of a difference than what we saw in part B, because the difference is much greater than in B. So as we move through the chapter, what we're going to be looking at is locking down. If I had this sample value or I had this sample value, what does that tell me about these hypotheses up here in A? Would it suggest that we can't say that there's any difference and the null could still be true? Or does it suggest that there is a difference and the alternative set is the correct choice of statement?